You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor, subscribe to the channel, leave your comments below, and be sure to smash that like button. Before the LSU season started, I remember we looked at this. Mel Kiper had his big board, and on the big board, Kiper ranks the top 25 players in the country for the upcoming draft. And then he also ranks the top 5 at every position. And the takeaway from the big board initially was there was one LSU Tiger on the big board, and it was Malik Neighbors at number 17. Again, this was a month ago, really right before the season had started. So Malik Neighbors was the only LSU Tiger on Mel Kiper's big board. A lot of people were very high, obviously, on Mason Smith, but didn't play a year ago, a lot to be seen still. And running through the rankings at every position, which was interesting, the only 2 players that were on Kiper's position rankings were Malik Neighbors and Mason Smith. He had Malik Neighbors as the 3rd best wide receiver, and he had Mason Smith as the 4th best defensive tackle. Keep in mind, that's before the season started. It was interesting that the trio of, or I guess the quintuplet of draft analysts from ESPN, Kiper, Matt Miller, Steve Mensch, and Jordan Reed, all put blended their resources here for a consensus ranking of the draft prospects right now. Real quick, I'll just run through how their consensus top 10 ranking. Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr., Brock Bowers, Olamunwa Fashanu, it's the offensive tackle from Penn State, Drake May, Dallas Turner, Shadur Sanders, Joe Alt, Keon Coleman, and Jared Verse. That's the top 10 consensus from all of the draft analysts there at ESPN. But rolling through, I thought we'd see more LSU players on the list. And the only one we saw, in addition to who was there before the season, is Mekhi Wingo, interestingly enough. Neighbors is on all 3 lists as a top wide receiver. Mason Smith is listed by 2 of the 3 as a top defensive lineman, but Mel Kiper lists Mekhi Wingo as the 4th best defensive lineman in this draft. So that's really the only change. So right now, it's just Smith, Neighbors, Wingo are the only 3 that they're projecting among the top handful of players at their position for this upcoming draft. And for me, that's always interesting because players, if you get outside of the top 2 rounds, are kind of where you have a decision to make. And I know I'm looking forward, but I'm just taking this opportunity to project a bit because we have the opportunity to do so. But it's a little surprising not seeing Jayden Daniels among the top 5 quarterbacks in this draft class. Now, maybe that changes when you get into Pro Day and all that sort of stuff and as the season goes along. But Caleb Williams, Drake May, Shadur Sanders, Quinn Ewers, Michael Penix, that's kind of the consensus. Jordan Reed does have J.J. McCarthy in his top 5, as does Matt Miller. But no Jayden Daniels as of now. That doesn't mean you couldn't see more than 5 quarterbacks taken in round 1 or that he could move into round 1. He's certainly playing as if he could right now. Logan Diggs. Logan Diggs is certainly playing like a guy that will hear his name called on draft day. Not in round 1 necessarily, but certainly back-to-back 100-yard performances. If he's a legitimate 1,000-yard rusher and continues with this consistency, he's a guy who could leave. Garrett Dellinger is graded exceptionally well. He could certainly leave early. Charles Turner is another draft-eligible lineman there who you would expect would hear his name called. Malik Neighbors, interestingly, no Brian Thomas, who leads the nation in touchdown receptions. Who's a junior. He's draft-eligible, not listed among the top 5 receivers in this year's draft. A very deep receiver draft class for what it's worth. And then Wingo and Smith. What I guess there's 2 ways to look at this. The sort of lack of prospects listed on a draft board like this. It's, number 1, it's really encouraging because you say, man, you're going to get a lot of guys back next year. And in part, that's true. Like, Will Campbell will be back. Emory Jones will be back next year. There's a lot of young players. Harold Perkins will be back for another season. There's a lot of young players that you're going to count on moving forward. You expect like Whit Weeks to keep getting better. So that's the really encouraging part of it. The young guys that you know are going to return and continue to grow and elevate. The other part of it is the obvious that you have a lot of upperclassmen that aren't going to be necessarily draft prospects because you have a void in talent. That really illustrates what's going on with this team right now. You've got some young guys that are playing exceptionally well that aren't draft eligible, and you got some veteran guys that aren't playing well, in particular in the secondary, which is why you're in the sort of conundrum you are defensively. So it'll be really interesting to watch over the next 6 games, the next 6 regular season games and into the postseason, how much LSU can continue to grow and develop. I referenced that, I was on the Feinbaum show earlier today, and he was asking me about the LSU defense and what went wrong, and I'd kind of, in so many words, explained it. You missed on portal guys. There's not really another way to say it. Brian Kelly inherited a mess. He went into the portal a year ago. He hit on a bunch of players. Those guys left, like Jark Bernard Converse, Mekhi Gardner, of course, Joe Fouché, Jay Ward, went to the NFL. You had to replace all those guys with another portal class, and you missed on a lot of guys. It's not negative. It's just the reality of what happened. So, how much better can your young players get between now and the end of the season is going to be the ticket for the LSU defense, and for a lot of the young guys who may have their name on this draft list in years to come. But that's the good news, is that you do have a lot of young talent that's not yet draft eligible that'll be back. That'll help supplement after you do lose some of these star players to the draft after this season. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.